Good morning. Our prelude this morning is from the Singing Living Tradition hymnal, number 389, Gathered Here. Please join me. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. One more time. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gather here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton. My name is Gail Rappold, and I'm your service leader this morning. I want to thank today's service team, which includes Rachel Derry, Cindy Carey, Joanne Deere, the music committee, Tim Versteeg, John Elliott, Bruce McPherson, and Reverend Jamie Boyce. I want to also acknowledge Pat Dickinson, who has helped develop this service with our speaker, Brenda Jacobs, and Paula Barner for sharing her very personal story as part of this morning's service. Today, our service will be different in format. The service itself will be short, with music, readings, and stories. After the postlude, Joys and Sorrows and Announcements, our speaker, Brenda Jacobs from the Hamilton Regional Indian Center, will be introduced. As is tradition in Indigenous cultures, she will introduce herself, give a thanksgiving, and then tell us about the work of the center. Following her talk, there'll be an opportunity for people to write their questions in the chat box, and Tim Versteeg will read the questions out to Brenda. After Brenda is thanked, there'll be chat groups available for those who wish to process what they've learned and talk further about the ideas in the service. Our land acknowledgement this morning is from the city of Hamilton, and Brenda has helped me with it. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. As settlers, we continue to benefit from this land and its resources. As settlers, we must ask ourselves how or if we have shared and cared for the earth and its gifts. Facing the truth is hard. Truth must come before reconciliation. Our call to worship this morning is Senator Murray Sinclair's response on CBC's The Current to the question of why Indigenous peoples don't just get over residential schools. He says, my answer has always been, why can't you always remember this? Because this is about memorializing those people who have been victims of a great wrong. Why don't you tell the United States to get over 9/11? Why don't you tell this country to get over all the veterans who died in the Second World War instead of honoring them once a year? We should never forget, even once they have learned from it, because it's part of who we are. It's not just part of who we are as survivors and children of survivors and relatives of survivors. It's part of who we are as a nation. And this nation must never forget what it once did to its most vulnerable people. Our chalice is a reminder of the light and hope of our faith. We light it each time we gather to remind us of the sacredness of our time together and our connection to our larger community and the world. As Reverend Jamie lights the chalice, please join me in the chalice lighting words on your screen.
Number 347, Gather the Spirit. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame, witness the mystery of this hour, our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit, growing in awe, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
Our story for all ages today is The Orange Shirt Story by Philip Webstad, with illustrations by Brock Nickel. This is the true story of a little girl and her very important orange shirt. 6-year-old Philip Webstad was as excited to wear her shiny new orange shirt as she was to attend school for the first time. But her first day at the St. Joseph Mission near Williams Lake, BC was nothing like she expected. Her orange shirt was taken away from her, never to be returned. Since 2013, each year on September 30th, we wear orange to honor the residential school survivors like Phyllis. We honor their experiences and the experiences of their families. Orange Shirt Day is an opportunity for First Nations, local governments, schools, and communities to all come together in the spirit of reconciliation and hope for future generations of children. It is a day to reaffirm that every child matters. We mark the end of September because that was the month when children were taken from their homes to go to residential schools. September was described by one elder as the crying month. When Phyllis was a little girl, she lived with her granny on the Dog Creek Reserve, part of the Squaxin First Nation. Their home had no electricity and no indoor toilet. In the summer, when the sun was hot, Philip would cool herself in the bathtub full of water that Granny kept in her garden. Phyllis and Granny lived off the food they grew in Granny's garden and berries from the land. Granny and Phyllis would go to the Fraser River and catch fish. They would eat some fish for dinner and dry the rest on a drying rack to save for winter. They didn't have much, but they got by with what they had. Growing up, Phyllis felt lonely. There weren't many children on the reserve to play with. Each September, all the older children, like her cousin, would leave the reserve to go to school. Phyllis looked forward to the day she could go too. Phyllis didn't get many hugs when she was little, but she did have Granny, and Granny's house was a safe place for everyone on the reserve. There were lots of people who came to Granny's for help and advice. Philip's favorite place to be was Granny's kitchen. When Phyllis turned 6 in July, Granny made her a cake to celebrate her birthday. Granny told Phyllis now that she was 6, she was old enough to go to school. When September came, she would go to the residential school, St. Joseph's Mission, for the first time. Phyllis was excited about going to school so she could play with her cousin and the other children. She wanted to find out what happened there and hoped she would make some friends. Before her first day at school, Granny took Phyllis into town to buy her a new shirt. They didn't have a car or truck, so when they went into town, they would take a blue bus that they called the stage. Going to town was exciting. They took the stage down a noisy and bumpy dirt road, and soon the bumps stopped and the noise hushed. Phyllis looked out the window and saw a paved road whizzing by underneath them. The town was so loud and busy with people and vehicles everywhere. There were shops to visit and restaurants to eat in. One shop had a red and white pole outside of it. Phyllis watched it twirl round and round, and she wondered where the stripes were going to. Granny took Phyllis to a restaurant, and they sat at a booth with a mini jukebox. When Phyllis dropped a coin into the slot, the box would play a song for her. Phyllis ordered breakfast with 2 eggs, and when they came, they were sunny side up. It was like they were looking up at her from the plate. Phyllis didn't know how to eat them. Granny's eggs were always scrambled. After breakfast, Granny took Phyllis to a shop that was filled with clothes and toys, and Phyllis picked up a shiny orange shirt that laced down the front. It was bright and exciting. She felt as excited about the shirt as she did to go to school. Granny bought the shirt, and they got back on the stage and went home, and Phyllis held the bag with her orange shirt in it all the way. She promised herself that she wouldn't wear it until the big day when she went to school. Phyllis waited and waited, and finally the day arrived. Phyllis, wearing her shiny orange shirt for the first time, said goodbye to Granny. Granny patted her on the head and said, "What loves it?" Phyllis got on the stage with all the other children and waved at Granny from the window. It was a 2-hour journey to get to the residential school, much further than Phyllis had ever traveled before. She stared out the window, waiting to see the place where they were going. When they arrived, Phyllis started to feel very scared. The residential school was so much taller than anything she had seen before. The building seemed cold and unfriendly as the nuns who came out of the school to meet them. Phyllis asked her cousin how long they had to stay there. Her cousin said that it would be 300 sleeps until they could go home. 300 sleeps. That sounded like forever. The nuns took all the children inside and walked them down a long hallway in single file. In a room, the children were undressed and made to take a shower. Phyllis had never seen water coming out of the walls before. Phyllis didn't want to take off her shiny orange shirt, but the nuns made her. After she had showered, they gave her different clothes to wear. She didn't like them. The nuns put Phyllis in a chair and cut her hair short. She asked for her orange shirt back, but they told her that she wouldn't be allowed to wear it anymore. Phyllis cried, "Give it back. It's not yours, it's mine. My granny bought it for me." But no one would listen. The residential school wasn't where Phyllis learned. It was a place where the children slept and ate. Phyllis soon realized the nuns didn't care if she was tired, sick, hungry, or sad. She had to rely on herself, and it felt as though she didn't matter. At dinner time, Phyllis and the other children would eat tasteless and almost colorless food. There were pale green, moon-shaped beans that tasted awful, and there was smelly fish that definitely wasn't like the salmon that she and Granny used to eat together. At night, Phyllis wondered why Granny was not coming to get her. She would cry herself to sleep. In her dreams, she would play in Granny's garden and go salmon fishing in the river. Each day, the children went into town to attend public school. Before boarding the bus, they picked up a small carton of orange juice in brown paper bags with their lunches inside. Some days, one or two children got a chocolate bar in their lunch. Everyone would look to see if they had one too, but their lunch bags just had sandwiches in them. It felt like the grown-ups were playing a cruel joke on them. Phyllis took the bus to public school with her cousin. Each day, the bus driver dropped her cousin off at a different school. Phyllis wished she could go with her. She didn't understand why they couldn't be together. At school, Phyllis learned to read and write with all the other boys and girls, but she was still lonely. All the children from the residential schools were lonely because they had been taken away from their homes and their families. Her teacher was a curly-haired redhead. She was as nice as she smelled. She would smile at Phyllis and help her with her lessons. Phyllis wished she could go home with her teacher at the end of the day. She made being at the school bearable. Phyllis liked her teacher, but she was no substitute for Granny. She wondered what Granny was doing while Phyllis went to school every day. Phyllis missed her home and the garden. She started counting the days until she could go back again. Each day the number got smaller and smaller, and she waited and waited. The other children at school could order books from a book club, but none of the residential school children were allowed to get any. Phyllis didn't understand why they were treated differently. She wanted a book too. Why wasn't she allowed one? In the playground, she was just like all the other boys and girls. At lunchtime, everyone played together. Phyllis learned to swing on the swings and would wrap her swing around the pole and watch it unwind. The best time of day was when the bus came to pick them up after school. Phyllis always saved a seat for her cousin. When it came to her stop, her cousin would run on the bus and plop down next to Phyllis. And sometimes she would bring onions that she picked on the school ground. Her cousin would say, "Want some?" And Phyllis would laugh at her onion breath. But Phyllis was always so hungry. She would grab an onion and eat it like an apple. Her breath smelled just as bad as her cousin's did. On the bus, they learned to sing songs together. They sang, "We are the missions, mighty, mighty missions. Everywhere we go, people want to know who we are. So we tell them we are the missions." The seasons changed from fall to winter, then to spring, and finally, it was summer again. Phyllis was excited about going home. She never wanted to go back to the residential school or see the cold-hearted nuns ever again. After 300 sleeps, the stage came and took Phyllis back home to the reserve. She was so happy to be back to a place where she mattered, a place where people cared about her. That summer, she stayed at home with her granny. She stayed in her familiar house and worked with Granny in the garden. She went fishing in the Fraser River, and she ate the salmon for dinner. She had everything she needed, and she never went back to the residential school again. Not every child was as lucky as Phyllis. That's a picture of Phyllis at the end there today. That's our story for today.
Thank you, Tim. This is our time for meditation. There'll be a reading, followed by silence, and then music. In these moments of contemplation, I invite you to breathe deeply and close your eyes if you wish. This morning, the meditation words are from Honorary Witness, the late Honorable Andy Scott, former Minister of Indian Affairs, as spoken to the Truth and Reconciliation Committee and found in that book on pages 277-78. When I was invited to become an honorary witness, I thought I was prepared, having been involved in the settlement process and having already met and heard from survivors. I was not. I heard about not knowing what it meant to be loved, not knowing how to love. I heard about simply wanting to be believed that it happened, just like I said. We heard about a deliberate effort to disconnect young children from who they are. We heard about a sense of betrayal by authority, government, community, and church. We heard about severe punishment for speaking one's language, living one's spirituality, seeking out one's siblings. We heard about death. We heard about forced feeding and physical and sexual abuse. We heard about forgiveness as a way to move on, and we heard that from those who felt they would never be able to forgive. I could not and cannot imagine being taken away to a strange place as a 5 or 6 year old, never knowing why or for how long. Reconciliation is about survivors speaking about their experiences, being heard and being believed. But it's also about a national shared history. As Canadians, we must be part of reconciling what we have done collectively with who we believe we are. To do that with integrity and to restore honor, we must all know the history so we can reunite these different Canadas.
To the Hi, I'm Paula, and this is my story. There I am in the photo of the German, English, Irish family, the little brown kid who doesn't match. I knew I was adopted, of course, but the Catholic Children's Aid in Toronto in 1947 told my parents that I was French and English, though I might be a little dark. Such language was considered appropriate then when dealing with wealthy white Catholics. When I found my birth mother 32 years later, she came to meet me and my children. After a long hug, she pushed me back, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "They told you we're Indians, right?" And right then, something in my being fell into place. Of course, they hadn't told me or my adoptive parents beyond the suggestion of dark. But oh my goodness, Indians had always been so attractive to me. And up north was where I wanted to be, and trees were what I wanted around me. And I had my Buffy St. Marie album. So yes, I knew it already without knowing it officially. But of course, I didn't know it really at all. It was 1979. And I had never heard of residential schools, or the history of Six Nations, or the Wiki Reserve where my birth mother was born on Manitoulin Island. I didn't know a single Indigenous person other than the mother I'd just met. And she had been raised in Toronto. But then she told me how it happened, how I happened. And that was the first learning I took in that taught me the need for truth and reconciliation long before it became a Canadian thing. In fact, I had no words for what I knew was needed, and I spent many years being angry and feeling like an outsider wherever I was. My grandmother was not forced to go to residential school, so you'd think that would be good for her and her daughters, right? In fact, she was the first woman from the res to be admitted to St. Joseph's School of Nursing in Guelph, graduating in 1917. She later married out to a French Canadian, and they had 5 daughters, moved to Toronto, and raised them to be real Canadians, with only occasional visits to Wiki. But Kate, my grandmother, had already learned self-loathing from somewhere, and she passed it on to her daughters as a warning. Don't ever get pregnant outside of marriage, or they'll call you a dirty squaw. Did she learn that in Little Current? In nursing school? Was it just something you breathed in with the Canadian air? Did she learn it on the res itself? My mother learned it from her mother, but she didn't believe it. At least I don't think she did, not in the way that Kate had believed it. Still, in 1947, there were no single moms. Either your family took care of the newborn or you gave it up. And my mother knew better than to tell her mother about me. So that is my truth, but how to reconcile? I've been working on it for over 40 years now. My anger still roils, and I still long for home. I read a lot, visit Wikwemikong sometimes, and recently found some new relatives who also descended from Kate. And they are the family, aside from my own 2 kids, that I feel the most comfort with in all my 74 years on this earth. We seem to think and feel alike. How about that?
Number 134, Our World is One World. Our world is one world. the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate we make a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
Our closing words are again words from Senator Murray Sinclair. The road we travel is equally important to the destination. There are no shortcuts. When it comes to truth and reconciliation, we are forced to go the distance.
Listen to the voices of the First Nations. Listen to the voices of the First Nations, calling out the messages of the earth and sky, telling us what we need to know in order to survive. Listen to the voices of the First Nations. Listen to the voices of the old women. Listen to the voices of the old women, calling out the messages of the moon and sea, telling us what we need to know in order to be free. Listen to the voices of the old women. Listen to the voices of the young children. Listen to the voices of the young children, calling out the messages of the heart and soul, telling us what we used to know before the lies were told. Listen to the voices of the young children. Listen to the voices of the young children. Listen to the voices of the old women. Listen to the voices of the First Nations. Listen to the voices of the living.
I will now ask Brenda Jacobs to introduce herself, to bring us a Thanksgiving, and to tell us about the work of the Hamilton Regional Indian Center. Brenda?
Sego. Sego Sewaguego, Neogoda Sado, Young Yats, Ganyak the Haga, Newago and Joda, Aswege, Nedawageno. So I just introduced myself in the Mohawk language. I'm from Six Nations, and I'm of the Bear Clan. So here at Six Nations, I follow the traditional system and heard Cayuga most of my life, but learned the Mohawk language around the same time my youngest was learning and went to the Mohawk immersion school here on Six Nations. So we can't go, back to another country to learn our language. We have to, we have many second language learners now, and many of our elders, they hold that language, and that language is very important and connects us to everything, connects us to all of creation, connects us to our ceremonies. And so it's vital. It's part of who we are. So it's we need at HRC, we have a Mohawk Ganyangeha. That's like Mohawk words. We have a class on Tuesdays, and so we're waiting on word of funding for a new beginner class, and for Ojibwe also. So that language is who we are, and we need that. We won't be a people without that language. And so my youngest, so she went from kindergarten to grade 10, and so they learn about the culture, they learn about the ceremonies, they learn about this Thanksgiving address that I'm going to say. And so it's they learn a lot there. And so some of them go on to be the speakers in our longhouse and go do the ceremonies, whether it's at at the longhouse, whether it's those personal ceremonies that happen at your house, or the speeches that are needed when deaths happen. And so it's very, very important. I can't stress that enough. And so, as we know, the children who went to residential schools, they weren't allowed to speak their language. So many, they came from those traditional families, alienated from their families when they went home. And so a lot was lost, a lot of the culture, their identity, the language, relationships, ceremonies that they didn't get to, understand. So a lot of divisions were created. So I'm gonna, I'll do the Thanksgiving address, and then maybe I can put up this picture of it. Well, maybe I'll do that after, just because it'll help with the explanation, because I'll explain after. Okay, so ona es wada honsionste ne ohenda gully wadakwa ne got nuala donsala. De tina walado ne ongwe su'a etoni on duhage ne got nigula. De tina walado ne got ne galunyo etoni on duhage ne got nigula. De tina walado ne gunjo su'a etoni on duhage ne got nigula. De tina walado ne de la su'a dahnu o no guasu'a etoni on duhage ne got nigula. De tino walado ne johekwa dahnu ne agua goadi goana ne honeste nok one ono usala ne osaheda etoni on duhage ne got nigula. De tino walado ne gahik su'a dahnu ne agua goadi goana ne nyohandesa etoni on duhage ne got nigula. De tino walado ne gondilio su'a dahnu ne agua Gawadi goana ne Oscanundo, Etonion Duke, ne got Nigula, de Tino Lado ne Galunda Sua, Dahnune, Dahnune, Dahnune ne Agua, Gawadi goana ne Moata, Etonion Duhage, ne got Nigula, de Tino Lado ne Ojida Sua, Etonion Duhage, ne got Nigula, de Tino Lado ne Gaeli Nigawelage, Atonion Duhage, ne got Nigula. De Tino Walado ne Songwai and Jage Galakwa, Atonion Duhage, ne got Nigula. De Tino Walado ne Bloody Wales, Atonion Duhage, ne got Nigula. De Tino Walado ne Yeti Sota Hasundanaka Galakwa, Atonion Duhage, ne got Nigula. De Tino Walado ne Ojisto Gualuño, Atonion Duhage, ne got Nigula. De Tino Walado ne Gaeli Neonguedage, Atonion Duhage, ne got Nigula. De Tino Walado ne Songwai Diso, Atonion Duhage, ne got Nigula. Okay, so when I learned the Thanksgiving dress, I'm just going to put the picture up. Oh, I got to share screen first. There's technology. I had to catch up. Okay, so can everybody see? I hope. So this is the Thanksgiving address. So we started when I was taught. It was in the Cuga language, and so the language teacher, she, there's at least 16 different parts of creation that we acknowledge, and it starts with the people. And so what my Mohawk teacher, how she explained it, or she didn't even explain, she just kind of showed with her hands. She just went from the earth up to the sky. That includes everything. And so we start with the people, and then we go to the waters, and then the swimmers, the fish, and then the roots and plants, then the foods. Our leaders of the foods are our traditional food, the corn, beans, and squash. And then we go to the hanging fruits, and their leader is the strawberry. And then we go to the animals, the four-leggeds, and their leader is the deer. And then we go to the trees. Their leader is the maple tree. And then we go to the birds. Their leader is the eagle. And so you can see at the top of that tree there, we hold that eagle very, very high in our culture, and we have a song and that goes with that. And then we go to the four winds. The thunders first. No, the four winds and then the thunders. And then the sun, the moon, the stars, the four beings are helpers, and our creator, Songwai Diso. So that's what this kind of goes through, this Thanksgiving address. This is just a poster that was created by the immersion school, and so it kind of captures everything there. And inside the middle circle is our way of life. So we've been impacted, in my trainings at HRIC. I'm the cultural capacity trainer, and I do the trainings to provide that education and on the history, worldview, and the impacts of colonization in residential school. So I also, use the turtle and I'm going to stop share. And use the turtle as a engagement activity to help bring everything together, because there are many impacts. You know, on the turtle, there's 13 sections, which represent the 13 moons. And so it came to me to, you know, use each section and show what the impacts have been, because they have been many. You know, missing, murdered Indigenous women, you know, the disrespect for women, in language, you know, not being able to learn language, you know, many more knowledge. When our children didn't get to be around their elders, then they weren't able to learn that knowledge, because that's our elders hold that knowledge. So, you know, the assimilation, the oppression, you know, all those impacts are you know, spoken about on this with this engagement activity that I do. And so at the, you know, HRIC, we do, I'm going to put up a few slides up here also with that, so you can see what we do. We have many programs, over 30 programs, over about 50 staff. I'm just going to go to the end where our parenting has been affected. I have a slide on that too. And so these are our programs. This is one, we have 3 pagefuls here. You know, right from birth or pregnancy up to, you know, our elders, we have programs for. One of them is to begin with the, you know, pregnancy, the Canada Prenatal Nutrition Program, a family program, the CAPC. I used to be in the cultural resource coordinator role prior to being the cultural trainer. And so I did a lot of workshops on, you know, whether it was moccasin making or talking about medicines that help us. What else do we do? The moss bags, you know, for that our babies are carried in on that. They used to carry them on the cradle boards. You know, there's teachings that go with it. And so I like to sew, so it, you know, it fit right in there. Partnered with the language teacher and also did the workshop on the Thanksgiving address. And that can be taught, you know, simply because we need to know those words for each one of those things, as I had said in the Thanksgiving address. We have Aboriginal healing and wellness. We have Indigenous mental health. Kijé is the, where am I? Kijé is I'm a kind man. So they're learning about violence against women and having healthy relationships. We have lifelong care that would normally in person, that would have been a lunch on a Wednesday and activities also, probably a craft or a bingo, you know, so that was well attended. Fetal alcohol, FASD program, a Guego for the children, some of the children in the 7 to 12 years age. We have a criminal court worker and a family court worker. We have alcohol and drug and addictions worker. The language, we just have the Mohawk Ganyangeha going right now. Right to play, so 14 to 24 youth age. The Shea, an alternative secondary school for our teens. Wasanabin, 13 to 18 years, you know, support, whatever they kind of need. This lady here, she works well with them. Aboriginal healing Aboriginal healthy living adults and children, 2 programs there, literacy basic skills, Undayan. So we have some housing units where some youth, I think they're up to 24 that 14 to, no, be 18 to 24, I think is their age range for Undayan. They have a navigator, they have journey coach. There's about 4 navigators there. So the housing, it's the youth are in, they're our future. So they need a lot of support due to those impacts. Parenting's been impacted. So a lot of impacts there throughout the ages, for all ages. And we also have Aboriginal healthy babies and children, the cultural capacity training that I do. A Patisawin is employment services. Great. Also some more employment and training. Men and youth homelessness. Youth in transition support. I would partner with them and do crafts and just coping skills. We weren't taught about coping skills. So part of that medicine wheel, is to look at all those parts of us, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. So when we're out of balance, when we don't have all of those parts of us, or that's an important part, to have that balance and come to that peace. And that's been interfered with. So the youth outreach, Indigenous wellness, concurrent disorders, housing support, mobile street outreach. We have a van that goes out every day downtown and around Hamilton to give, we prepare food and coffee and drinks to connect with our people and whoever needs it. Our programs, we don't turn anyone away. So we're pretty inclusive, and that's part of that medicine wheel. All 4 colors of man, we're all equal. Homeward Bound, that's a partnership with Mohawk College. And so the education, that's a program for education and housing for women. And so we do, quite a bit there at HRC, very supportive, and, looking at all those areas, the culture with our cultural resource coordinator, many of our people are looking for that culture. And so it's important that that we're there to connect with them.
Brenda, we have our first question, if you'd like, which seems to fit here. So we have a question: do people come in from the 6 Nations Reserve to the programs? Is that something that's done, or is this for mainly people who are in Hamilton already?
I didn't catch all of the question. You kind of cut out. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Do people come in from 6 Nations for the programs, or are they mainly for people who are in Hamilton already?
It's for our some might, but we see mainly our Indigenous community in Hamilton, the urban Indigenous community. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have we're putting together a guide, and there's the Haudenosaunee 6 Nations info will be in it, and the Anishinaabe information will also be provided in there. So some, we've been working on that since about April. So people come into our program, if they have questions, some of that information and where to look it up will be in the guide. Any other questions?
I'd like to ask, how many nations are there, do you think, that come to the center? How many nations are you serving?
Probably all of the 6 nations, some Tuscaroras. We don't hear too many on Tuscaroras. The Ojibwe, Cree, OG Cree. Odd once in a while, a new person. They might have that in their in their line, in their ancestry. We have Métis, so quite a few, quite a number.
We have a question of where the center is located. I'm just going to remind folks that if you want to ask a question, please put it in the chat. So raising hands is fine, but we're trying to do it through the chat. Okay, go ahead. So where is the center located, Brenda?
So it's at 34 Ottawa Street. Yeah, we have we're still looking. We're looking for another building just because there's so many staff and we're growing. So we'll see what happens after COVID.
And who, from Sarah Ahurst, who participates in the Respect for Women program? Is it youth or adults, or is it everyone?
That's mainly for men. And I think there's also a woman co-facilitator, or at least she comes in through one of the weeks. I think it's a 7 or 8 week program. Yeah. So, the relationship has to be built, trusting and yeah, it's a pretty interesting program. Yeah. And I think it's important that they hear, the women, the cultural pieces and how the disrespect, happened and the effects of and impacts of when the European settlers arrived, they brought violence. The thinking was brought, as far as, savages and barbarians and the needing to civilize. So it was brought here, and that's part of that truth, and with the Doctrine of Discovery, and seeing the land is empty, but there were millions of Indigenous people here. So it's a big picture. It's a big picture. This truth and reconciliation. There's many, as you could see, if you've ever looked at the TRC, whether it's the summary or the full report, there's many things to look at, the systems and, who created the systems, and, that thinking was brought into it, and no input from Indigenous people. So being put through systems that don't work for us. So changes need to happen, and I'm sure, part of my engagement activity is to look at, what will our future, what do those children, what do they have to say? They hopefully, that's part of our Indigenous worldview, is to look at the 7 generations ahead. So it's keeping all children in mind, for whether it's the land, the water. Everybody needs that clean water. Everybody needs, clean air. Everybody needs, land that is good to grow things. And so it's a big picture. It's a lot.
So
I can see the chat here. So
do you want to go ahead and answer them then?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for, okay. Yes, I did go to Hagersville. I went to Hagersville High School. Yeah. Okay. And about reconciliation and reuniting. Were we ever reconciled? Oh, that's part of what's happening today. Were we ever reconciled or united? So I think that's just beginning. Different people at different times have begun that reconciliation, at least becoming aware right now. Maybe not right now, but as we go along, it's also a reconciliation, because it's not just words, it's got to be action also. And so then, maybe when you're in I saw some of the words and in some of the hymns that were being sung, the being heard is part of relationship. And so for those relationships to change, we have to hear. Our voices do need to be heard. We need to be seen. We need to be valued. And so it's relationships need to change. And so it's hard work to change those relationships. And so united, it also says here. So even amongst our own people, the divisions that were created, it's a hard road, because of those impacts. The churches cause division with the children being taught at residential school. So it's hard, and when you don't have a clan or nation, then it's like, where do you fit? Because we've been given, we have a traditional system, and you need a clan, and you need a nation through the mother's line, or Six Nations, or Haudenosaunee, and for Anishinaabe, they follow the father's line. So but there are ways to if you really want that, you're gonna ask those questions and find out, because the people are there to ask those things. And that's who we are. That's what makes us Haudenosaunee, that clan system, and the language, and the governance, and so it's pretty important. And then how can the good mind help us? I think with the good mind, that's another good piece of this, because to me, it has to do with the healing. I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk about those impacts, or I'm second generation survivor. My grandmother, my mom's mom, was in residential school in Brantford, and I remember, so I was raised in I was raised in violence. I was raised and my parents didn't drink, but they still had those dysfunctional factors. They still had the dysfunctions, and so we didn't communicate well. I wasn't taught about that. My feelings weren't acknowledged, and so my voice wasn't acknowledged, and so I had to do healing work around that. And so it doesn't really ever end, but it lessens. That hurt lessens, the anger for me lessened, and then I could have more peace inside. And so then this is part of what the good mind is to me, to look at those hurts, to feel them, so that I don't carry them carry them. And because it can weigh us down, it can hurt us. It can hurt our physical body. It can lead us to those addictions. So the good mind is a simple term, but it's hard to get there. It's a lot of work to get there, but it's worth it. It's worth it. You know, I always wanted to feel better, so it's worth it. It's worth the change. And so I think that's what the good mind is. It's a journey. It's a journey to get there. You know, and it's also part of worldview, you know, to have at Six Nations, to have those principles, those values, and they're in all cultures, you know, compassion and integrity, honesty, you know, respect, you know. So it's all part of, you know, there's are many pieces to the good mind. And then our next question, can you comment on the Catholic bishop week? I think it needs to come from the Pope. That's what I think, because he's their leader. He wrote the not him, right through history. If we look at Doctrine of Discovery, I encourage you to look up Doctrine of Discovery. So he, you know, the European settlers, they brought those papal bulls, and it had on there, you know, who they were claiming. They were claiming the land in the name of their religion and their country. So that's when there's a lot to that. And so I think it needs to come from the Pope. That's I think that would be important, because he's you know a leadership figure. So I think it would mean a lot. He's made a statement to the people in Ireland, and those I think it was those abuses that happened in Ireland. So I think it's the Pope. Okay. Is it reconciliation or reparation that's needed? It's kind of both, I believe. It all fits in the it's like repairing, you know, when you there's a statement, you know, that I use in my training, a quote from an elder, and he says, we can't say goodbye to our problem until we have first said hello. So that means sitting the issue in on the table and looking at it, and you know, resolving it, so that we can have a good relationship, because it's all about relationship. That Thanksgiving address is all about relationship. We're having the relationship with the all of creation, each other, you know, the land, the water, those plants, they're living, you know, they give us our oxygen. So we're having a relationship with everything. And so that's what the Thanksgiving is about. And so, you know, repairing relationship, you know, when because I was also, because I carried that abuse, I you know, my older two suffered. And so it's about repairing that relationship. It's about apologizing to my children when I did things. And so it's you know, it takes humility, right, to look at your part in that relationship. So yeah, a lot is needed there.
Brenda, it's Gail. I'm wondering if you could take one more question, and then I'd like to have an opportunity to thank you.
Okay. Let me just see what the questions are. Okay. Somebody asked about the working with teachers from the school board. I've I've been asked to do some things for their for a summer program and some youth that we're working through them, but not specifically with the teachers. You know, so but where it's like we hear whenever, I think it happens whenever it's time, when the people are open, you know, and ready to look at, you know, the TRC and their part in it, then that's when it'll happen, when it's meant to. And yes, just one last question, just if you have any questions, yes, you just call the HRIC Hamilton Regional Indian Center, and yeah, somebody, you'll be directed to wherever the question fits. You know, we're always open to questions and connection with community. So thank you for having me, and thank you to Paula for your story and your courage, and for you know, your sharing. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Brenda, please don't leave yet, because I want a chance to thank you. First, I want to thank you for the time and care you took with me to answer my questions and to help me put this service together. Your gentle explanations helped me to learn, as you would say, in a good way, and I really appreciated that. I also want to acknowledge our friends from the Peterborough congregation who are with us today and who have asked to join us. Brenda, you've said language is who we are, and we need to relearn it. I think there are some things about language and learning that, of course, we as settlers need to pay attention to. And your gentleness in addressing reconciliation and your kindness in how you have responded, I think mean a lot to all of us in this congregation. Paula and I have been sitting here kind of amazed and looking at each other as you shared the depth and breadth of the programs that you offer. I think perhaps it's been in this last few minutes that I've been most touched, as you have so bravely shared your personal experiences and talked about the work it takes to get to a good mind and your own humility. I think that for me, that has been an incredibly powerful learning, how important it is for us, for me, to really look inside and pay attention. And I loved your statement, I can't say goodbye to a problem until I've said hello to it. And I think that's perhaps something as a mantra that we can all take away as members of First Unitarian, as we think about what truth means for us and then what reconciliation means. So I am so incredibly grateful to you for your time, both in planning and in speaking with us today. Thank you so very much. And
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
you're most welcome. We do have a bit of time for chat room for those who wish, and Tim, you will sort that for us. Chat rooms for those who are new to our congregation are small groups for conversation, and if you wish to participate and talk a bit more about what you've learned, please do. And if you wish to leave the service, you may do so now. Maybe, Tim, about 10 minutes max, and that'll give us a chance to talk about what we've heard and seen today. Thank you, everyone.